Hey, it's Chuck.
And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
October 6th, 2010. The number one Ohio State Buckeyes, led by the legendary Godfather Jim Tressel, rolled up into Camp Randall in Madison, Wisconsin to take on the Badgers, coached by the man we unaffectionately called Bert. And it just dawned on me this morning as I tweeted something out and got a question about it from one of our younger listeners that they're not aware of that nickname. My Uncle Mark wasn't either. He's a Kenosha, Wisconsin guy, big Badgers fan. We were talking once on a golf course, and I called him Bert, and he's like, it's Brett. No. It's Bert. It's absolutely Bert. And Bert was the coach of the Badgers at the time. Of course, he left to go to the SEC to coach at Arkansas. And he left because that was a period in Big Ten football where a lot of teams weren't fully invested. They weren't paying their assistant coaches. That's why he left. He couldn't keep them. And he took off to go to the SEC. And that is a big reason why we saw the gap between the SEC and the Big Ten during that time period. Much of the reason I resented a lot of these Big Ten programs at the time was because of this, because of the lack of investment. It is a totally different story today. Totally different. We look at Illinois right now, they're all the way in. Indiana, who beat them badly this year, they're all the way in. But Wisconsin, back in 2010, when the number one Buckeyes went up in there, man, it was a squad. They had John Clay, the big back, James White, the little back, Scott Tolzien, a quarterback who was really underrated. In that day, the Buckeyes could not get any pressure on him. I think he played for the Packers for like 4 years, but he ended up being a pretty decent NFL quarterback. Terrell Pryor was the Buckeyes quarterback. And when I look at Terrell Pryor, and I watched 15 minutes of this game earlier on today, he threw such a horrible pick to end the game. But Terrell Pryor in today's era with quarterback coaching, I think he could have been something special, man. I mean, he already was something special, but even in the NFL, he had the strength in his arm. He was just everything about his throwing motion, the trajectory he put on the ball. Like, if he had today's coaching, the way they work with quarterbacks from the time they're young, wouldn't his arm have been totally different? Like, wouldn't it have been? Am I dreaming to think this? I don't know, but I just look at Bryce Underwood and I look at TP, and physically, TP's got it on him and he's faster than him, but Bryce throws a much better ball. Is that because of coaching? I'm sure he was probably naturally better. Like, everybody was maybe naturally better as a quarterback, but I feel like Terrell could have been the guy that everybody talked about maybe coming out of high school out of Jeanette, Pennsylvania, like he would have been if he had that kind of, if he had a Brad Mandler, the best quarterback coach in the Midwest, if he had him working with him when he was young. Anyway, he was the quarterback that day. Wisconsin, this game was wild. They had an 89-yard drive in the second quarter. That was a 19-play drive. 19 plays, man. In Ohio State, in the fourth quarter, had a 19-play drive. Both drives took 10 minutes off the clock. That is old school Big Ten football. 19 flipping plays. 2 of them in one game. TP was 14-20 on the day. Boom Herron, 19 carries for 91 yards. John Clay got 100 yards on the Buckeyes. That was Nick Toon was their wide receiver. J.J. Watt, that was kind of like his breakout game on a national scene. And this game I'm bringing up because this game Brett Bielema is bringing up to his Illinois Fighting Illini. Not just this game, but he brought this team up to them at the beginning of the season. And what they've got at Illinois coming into Champaign is a crazy opportunity here. And it's an opportunity to upset number one that he was talking about at his press conference this week. It just doesn't come along much in your career to get this kind of opportunity, not just against number one, even against a top 5 team coming in, and you actually have a team that you think is prepared to put up a fight against them. He gets an opportunity at number one, and this guy is a crafty coach, and he beat USC this year coming in. Ohio State's not USC, but USC has a heck of an offense. That game was 34-32. Illinois was able to keep up with them. But the Buckeyes potentially, I mean, this game Saturday, it's one of those games where we look at it at the beginning of the schedule, the beginning of the season, the offseason, look at the schedule and say, okay, that one, Illinois was a top 10 team. Even still, I don't think most of us viewed them as a real top 10 team, but it looked like that's going to be a challenging game. Washington looked like it was going to be a challenging game. However, the Big Ten, when we look at the rest of this schedule this year, I mean, it just did not deliver. And we talk about disparity in these schedules because there's 18 teams, like, one Wisconsin's schedule, for instance, really, really hard. Michigan's this year, really, really easy. That'll happen with 18 teams. But when we look at the Buckeyes schedule at the beginning of the year, it looked pretty tough. It looked pretty tough, man. You started off with Texas, you ended with Michigan. In between, you had Illinois, you had Penn State, and you had that game out to Washington, which looked pretty tricky. And we've talked about the Ohio State schedule in 2026, which is insane. Like, it really, really insane. In 2026, next year, the Buckeyes have Oregon, Indiana, Texas, USC, Michigan. And even after that, you got a couple of the best in the Big Ten, second tier with Iowa and Nebraska. And then even Maryland, who's looking better. They're 4-1 this year. And then Northwestern. So the schedule next year, we're going to be like seriously up every week. It has not been that this year. Not at all. And on the surface, it did kind of look like we might be able to have a really exciting schedule. But now, this Illinois game, if Ohio State beats them, they're not going to be ranked. Penn State is not ranked. You may end this season, Texas unranked, Washington, who knows? But there's a possibility you end this year, Washington has a tough schedule, by the way, with just Michigan as your only ranked opponent. Definitely not what I would have bet if you asked me, all right, looking at this schedule heading into the year. Next year, you could potentially play 5 ranked teams on that schedule by the end of the year. But things change. Anyway, this Illinois team is obviously a good team. They're ranked 17th in the country, and they have played a good game against Duke. They beat Duke at Duke pretty soundly. Played a good game against USC. But, you got the Indiana game that is tough to get past. And Ryan Day was talking about it, and he said that you just got to throw it out. You got to throw it out. Now, I'm sure he's not thrown it out, not looked at it. I'm sure he has looked at it. He's the best coach in the country. And I think the Buckeyes right now are entering kind of like a class of their own in college football this year. And tomorrow, Ari Wasserman from On3 is going to come on and join me and talk about these Buckeyes from the national perspective as to what he thinks about this Buckeyes team. A guy who obviously covered the Buckeyes for 7 years and now, covers national college football. I want to know what the national tune is, what somebody who's covering all the teams and looking into these other teams a little more than maybe the average Buckeye fan, what their perspective is on these Buckeyes. So we'll talk to Ari about that tomorrow. But there's no doubt that this Texas game and what Texas has done since has made a lot of people throw out the old, who have they played, right? Who has Ohio State played? And they're trying to use this to discredit Ohio State. And honestly, now that Illinois was beaten by 50 points by Indiana, it doesn't matter what Ohio State does here. They're not going to beat Illinois by 50. So by comparison, the who have you played will still be going on. They're ranked 17th. They won't be after Ohio State beats them. But I got to say, if you are a football fan, college football fan, and you're looking at this Ohio State team, just watching them, and you can't tell how good this team is, you're just a hater, or you don't have any clue what you're looking at when it comes to football, which quite honestly, the longer I do this, the more I realize how many college football fans really don't know what they're looking at. I saw a guy the other day say, if Jeremiah Smith is generational, then Dallas Wilson is Jesus Christ returning. Dallas Wilson is Florida's 5-star freshman wide receiver who's really, really good. But if you can't see the difference between Jeremiah Smith and any other receiver in college football, you're just being disingenuous, or you have no clue what you're looking at. So Ryan Day called this a top 10 matchup. It's not. They're ranked 17th, which is good quality ranking. He said he's treating it like a top 10 matchup. And when you look at the Indiana game, very, very different game than the USC game. The USC game, that's a tough opponent. They beat them. That was huge for their fan base. Brett Bielema talked about that, how big that was to be able to beat USC last year, to be able to beat Michigan. Brand name programs, blue bloods, big for the program, big for the fans. And now they got the opportunity to beat Ohio State. But it was a non-blue blood that came in and just dusted them off. That's Indiana, the historical doormat of the Big Ten, 63-10. And I just can't get it out of my head. I can't get it out of my head, even though they beat Duke good. They beat USC. I just can't not see that. I can't unsee that game. It's impossible for me. And I think that will ruin their chances of the playoffs, even if they end up going 10-2. They rushed for 2 yards against Indiana. 11 attempts by their running backs, 29 yards by those running backs. That's how many negative yards Altmaier had, that they rushed for 2 total. Altmaier passed for 159. And on the other side, they gave up 267 to Fernando Mendoza through the air. And then Indiana ran it down their throats for 312 yards. 312 yards. And RD said, throw out the tape. Because the following week, they played USC very good, 34-32. USC can really score, but they kept the pace with them offensively. Will they be able to keep the pace with Ohio State offensively? I don't think so. I sure hope not. Because like it or not, people are going to judge Ohio State's performance here versus that Indiana performance. Not that it matters. The resume conversations don't mean much so long as Ohio State doesn't lose 3 games. That's really the only time the resume it comes into effect now, which I kind of like. But USC was averaging 6.5 yards a carry. Illinois held them to 3.7, but USC threw for 364 on them. So their defense has shown they can be had either way. They can be had through the air with 364. They can be had on the ground, certainly with 312 yards by Indiana. It just depends what they're going to focus on shutting down. In Ohio State, and Ryan Day talked about this on Tuesday, efficiency. We're going to take what they give you. We're going to just exploit whatever we can. And why not? It's the easiest way. And he was asked, does that maybe give the defense too much power to be able to dictate? And he said, look, I don't care. I'm going to take what I can and keep things simple. And it's working just fine. Illinois, 397 total yards a game. That's 38th in the country. We know that Luke Altmaier is a solid veteran quarterback. And Burt, one of the best coaches in the Big Ten. Ryan Day has a ton of respect for him. It seems like over the years now, we've seen a whole lot of coaches seem to really respect him. The Big Ten coaches really have a lot of respect for him, and he's kind of like one of the mouthpieces of the Big Ten, which is not something you would have imagined early on in his career where he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But the best teams in college football are the ones who are not just really good, but consistently good. And Ohio State has been consistently good, and they're a great football team. It would take a bad performance by Ohio State for this to be a close game. And when we look at Ryan Day and we look at the way he's approaching this year with just this maddening focus on keeping this team from getting complacent, keeping them hungry, keeping them desperate, in his words, I don't see a subpar performance coming from anybody on the Ohio State side. And when I was a kid, I remember hearing, I don't know, Lou Holtz, I think, say, this is college football. You got a different team every week. And it's fighting against that different team every week and being the same team every week that Ryan Day is really on this year. And he's done a great job so far. And I think that's why he's fighting so hard. He doesn't want to have a different team come out. He wants the same team, the same quality performance. And I think that we're going to get that against Illinois with the Buckeyes as a 16.5-point favorite. And I think that the Buckeyes are going to steamroll Illinois. I do. I think they're going to steamroll them. I can see ways where this might be a close game, but if it is, it's because there's been Ohio State not doing some things they were supposed to do, not because Illinois came out and beat them. They're not tough enough to do that. Ryan Day did compare this to Nebraska last year, which I hated. That Nebraska game last year, they go into Indiana as an undefeated team. Both of them were undefeated, I think 5-0 at the time, maybe 4-0. And Indiana beats them by 50. And then they come into Ohio State and it's down to the final possession against Ohio State. And a lot of those Indiana fans were talking at the time, that must mean they're in fact better than Ohio State. Then they came in and they got their comeuppance. And it shows that the transitive property does not work in college football. But I felt like Ohio State was more responsible than Nebraska was responsible for that being a close game. But when we look at this, Indiana goes in and dusts off Illinois by 50 points. Now the Buckeyes go and play them. Is it going to follow that same pattern? I don't think so. But nonetheless, it'll be a fun game. And of course, we will watch that game here at Juck on Bucks live at noon, 11 o'clock Central Time. So feel free to join me if you would like to. We'll have it up and streaming, and we have a good time during the game. Ohio State and Illinois, not anywhere near, even though it's a ranked matchup, the biggest game of the week for the Big Ten. That would certainly be Indiana heading out to Oregon. And Indiana going to Oregon is a test for Indiana. And it's really like, this is pretty new to them being this kind of team. They've only had the opportunity now to play Ohio State and Penn State. The only other kind of, the two teams that went to the national championship and they got beat bad. Now they get the opportunity to play another upper echelon team the next year. So we get to kind of compare, all right, I think they're better than they were last year. How are they going to do out at Autzen Stadium? The line 8.5. It seems like you would like to be able to see them play maybe just like a top 10 team, which they did in Illinois, but I just don't really think Illinois was a top 10 team, and see how they do. It's like I keep trying to discount their performances because they're Indiana. I will not discount it today or this weekend. If they keep it within a touchdown at Autzen Stadium, they have officially arrived. Like they're now in the upper tier of the Big Ten, and it's clear they're not going anywhere. They're not, which is amazing, really amazing. And if I was Penn State, I would do everything I could to get Curt Cignetti back home. He's a Pittsburgh guy. You can hear it when he talks, a Pittsburgh Paisan. I'd be doing everything to get him to Penn State. And huge game. The other huge game, USC and Michigan. And this one will go a long way for the playoff race here for the Big Ten, as we've got two teams with one loss, Michigan undefeated in conference, USC with one loss in conference. And Michigan, if they beat USC, all they got to do is just win their basically clunkers for the rest of the conference schedule until the Ohio State game. And they can lose the Ohio State game. They'll still be a playoff team. USC, on the other hand, they've got to beat Michigan, handle their business, and then they got two more huge games, Notre Dame and Oregon. If they beat Michigan and they split Notre Dame and Oregon, they're a playoff team. If they lose all of them, they're an 8-4 team. So it can go one way or the other for Lincoln Riley and USC. There's been some trash talk this week. Sharon Moore said the Coliseum sold out, but it's sold out because Michigan's coming. And then they asked Lincoln Riley what he had to say about that. And he said, I don't really care what he has to say. We're looking forward to playing. So I kind of like the trash talk. I'm really looking forward to watching this game. These two teams, and USC a 2.5-point favorite. Michigan, obviously my most hated team in college football ever, of course. USC is my second. Miami's my third. So we got a matchup here of the two teams I hate most in college football. And then we're now kind of in the race for who's the best team in the country right now with Miami. And we may have an opportunity to play them. We're certainly going to play Michigan. Who knows if we'll play USC next year. Maybe they make it to the playoffs. Maybe they don't. They got to beat Michigan to have a shot. Who do you think is going to win this game? I'm going with the underdog. Michigan, a 2.5-point underdog. I think they win the game outright. Obviously, teams from the East have not fared great going out West. We saw Michigan go out to Washington last year and lose. We saw the Buckeyes go out and win. Last year, we saw Penn State go out and beat USC at the Coliseum. And this year, I think we see the same thing. I think we see Michigan do what they do. An explosive offense against USC. They run the ball down their throat, limit the possessions USC gets, eat up a ton of the clock, I think they're going to get some pressure on Jordan Mailata. I think they're going to slow down that really nice run game that they've got going with Wayman Jordan. And I think Michigan's going to win this game. And I think that Michigan, when they win this game, is a playoff team, which is not what I thought entering the year. So props to them. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to beat them. And curious to know what you guys think about this game. But it'll certainly be a great topic of conversation come next week, because it looks like now, no matter what Ohio State does at the end of the year, and I do believe Ohio State's going to beat them at the end of the year, they're going to be a playoff team in year one with Bryce Underwood. And when we look at that team as a playoff team, that's a pretty dangerous team. And that's a team a lot of teams don't want to play. Their brand of football, if you play a certain style of football, is not good. It's not a good matchup. So really interesting stuff in the Big Ten. And this weekend going to play a big part of how it shapes up. Penn State obviously has 2 huge games left. Ohio State and Indiana. I don't think they're dead yet, man. I don't think they're dead yet. I think that look, we know they were a good team last year. It's the same team. So they're capable of being that team if they can get out of their own way. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they come into Columbus and we see a total 180 of a team that's now playing as tough as that game was last year at Happy Valley. What if they win? Then all they got to do is beat Indiana at home. All they got to do, it's a really tough one. All they got to do is beat Indiana at home. And all of a sudden, Penn State's a playoff team again. Now, Ryan Day spoke last night and talked about the CJ Hicks situation. And he was talking about eligibility and the 5 for 5. So the 5 for 5 has been a conversation for a little while. And that is, instead of 5 years to play 4 years, you get 5 years to play 5 years. It's a whole extra year of eligibility. And right now, the plan is to redshirt Hicks and Hartford, but use them if you need them. And to do that, instead of burn a year of eligibility, which would be Hicks's final, another year burnt for Hartford, if they're only playing a couple snaps in special teams, is what Day said. But if they would give them some kind of inclination as to what they're going to do about this 5 for 5, are they going to implement it or not? Then we will see him be able to play him. And right now, it sounds like he's trying to push them to give him some kind of indication. He was not asked about the portal Wednesday, which I thought was curious. I would have liked to hear what he had to say about that. But when we talk about that 5 for 5, been a lot of discussion about it. And when we look at who this benefits, the 5 for 5, obviously it benefits every player. But I think it really benefits programs like Wisconsin, like in Illinois, like in Iowa, who really try to get old and stay old. If they've now got 5 years of eligibility for every one of their players, they send a lot more seniors out the door than a place like Ohio State. And additionally, you can target transfers who are, 5th year guys. So you can get old, you can stay old. We saw this happening during the COVID extra year, which thank goodness that's gone. What else we saw during the COVID stuff with the guys being able to hang on a little longer was it lowered the amount of high school guys who were coming up into the ranks, which I don't love. And you don't get, you don't get any extra roster spots because now you got these guys for 5 years. You would think, all right, let's give us a couple extra roster spots. That's not happening. I don't really know why you need half a decade of eligibility, but it would help a couple of Buckeyes. I don't think it would help many. Like if we look at last year's senior class, we're talking about G. Scott, maybe would have been the only one who would have benefited coming back another year. If we look at this senior class, which was the class of 2022, really only CJ Hicks, I think it'd be the only one to benefit from another year. But if they do change that rule, hopefully Ryan Day can get that word soon. And he can be able to play everybody on the roster as he pleases. Appreciate you guys for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon. Check the Bucks out.